afraid I got to get started. I want to welcome everybody to this forum, and I hope that we all have a good learning experience and an honest exchange of opinions. There are some. We'd like to hear them, but we'd like everybody to keep a lid on it. Now, before we can begin, I've got the stand here, and so I'm going to take advantage of it. There have been some posts on what's called social media in the past couple of weeks, and what they're about is people starting with half-baked ideas and combining them with other half-baked ideas and coming to their own conclusions. And so I'd like to take the time that we have here and acquaint you with the James A. McKee Association and who we are and what we do and what we don't do. And also, you'll be acquainted with the Center for Business and Education as time goes on tonight. First of all, the mission of the James A. McKee Association. It's longer than what I'm going to read, but I wanted to read one part of it. The group shall support participatory democratic government by sponsoring non-partisan forums, both for the discussion of community issues and the presentation of electoral platforms. You all know we do candidate nights, and this is a non-partisan forum. So that's that. Some of the posts have taken one name, two names, one each, Jerry Sutton and myself, out of context, and come to the conclusion that we were in cahoots. That's good work. That we were putting this on together and it was going to be very one-sided. And that's not what we want. If you read the paper, you know that I've advertised for several weeks looking for folks to take both positive and negative views of the CPE, and we finally got some. So we're going to have a really open forum. But to clarify one point, it's true that I'm the president of the James A. McKee Association for a while, but I have never had any affiliation or anything to do with community resources. It's also true that Jerry Sutton is a longtime member of the James A. McKee Association, but he has never held an elective office in that association. He does have an elective office in community resources. So we did not get together and put this on. In fact, we specifically formed a committee, Ron Schmidt, Peggy Erston, Karen McKee, and myself, to put this together. Jerry Sutton was on the sidelines, and I don't know whether he liked it or not, but he'll let us know. So the program has been designed and planned by officers of the James A. McKee Association, and we don't take a position for or against anything as an association. I have an opinion in this regard, but you'll never know what it is. And I'm sure everybody else in the room has beginning to form an opinion at least, but we don't care what they are, not for this purpose. Here's the purpose of the forum and the ground rules. In keeping with its mission to provide public information and education for the greater Yellow Springs community, the James A. McKee Association is sponsoring this forum. It is designed to provide a platform for villagers to hear about the history, current status, and future plans of community resources, a local public community improvement corporation for a project known as the Center for Business and Education. The format for this evening is as follows. Community Resources has been asked to provide 3 factual, 10-minute presentations by Community Resources personnel, and they will follow me directly. These speakers have been associated with Community Resources in the past, but they're not currently active leadership in the group. Their charge is to to present information which reveals the history first, the current status second, and the future plans about the project that they had in mind. Starting several weeks ago, I wrote letters looking for people to volunteer to give 3-minute talks. We wanted to get 5 people to present talks in favor of the CBE and 5 people to present talks not in favor. Nobody volunteered to speak against the CBE until yesterday and today. So the program is better balanced than I thought it was going to be a couple of days ago. Aren't there chairs still available in one of those things for folks? You don't need to stand. Okay. So, but I remain open-minded, and if anybody in the audience really wants to get up and give a talk, I'm accepting volunteers right after the last minute. Pro or con, I don't really care. After each of the segments of the program, we will have questions and answers. And after the 7 3-minute talks that we have are given, then we will have to spend the rest of the time that we have with anybody, everybody, hopefully, from the audience, coming to a microphone. I'll have one. There's one at the back of the room, and I'm going to corner somebody else to have one. And you're allowed to ask one question or make one short comment. And the appropriate person in the room, be it from Community Resources, or Ken Bristol, or Laura Curlis, or somebody from council, that person, I'm hoping, will stand up and answer the question. So, I'm done. And we have a beautiful young lady over there named Jalen Grow, who managed to survive one of our candidates' nights, and everybody thought she did a great job. So we cornered her again to do this, and she's in charge from this point on.
Thank you. Again, my name is Jalen Grow. My maiden name is Jones, and I will be facilitating this evening. My role is to contribute structure and process to this community forum, so we're able to function efficiently. I need your help in doing that. Many of you know that I was born here in Yellow Springs, and I have a legacy. My family's been in this town for 7 generations. And what I know for sure is that we are very passionate people. Whether you've been here have your family's been here 7 generations or 7 months, we speak with passion. The way that you can help me do my job the best is when you speak with passion. Please speak with respect also. And we will move forward on this very quickly. As your facilitator, I want to create safe places for all participants to be able to talk openly. A successful outcome this evening will be if we're able to answer questions, if we're able to propose ideas, or if we have things that we want to comment on. We will move forward from here, not stand still. If you come up and your passion turns into yelling, I can't hear you. So I'm going to ask you to, let's stand down. Let's take a deep breath. Let's stretch. So please, really, let's look at making an effort to moving this forward. So let's get started. If we could have the panelists please come up from Community Resources and just come sit on the stage. We're just kind of informal here. I'm going to move this out of the way. Okay. Okay, as Harry was saying, we're going to start with phase 1, and each of the community resource panelists either current or past, will take 10 minutes or less, speaking on their Center for Business of Education, CBE, topic or expertise. And there's two things I'd like to ask you panelists. First, introduce yourself before you start speaking. And the second thing, if you have an acronym, state the exact name first and then say the acronym so everybody is up on the same page. Thank you.
Can you hear me?
You got to really like this.
Jerry's gonna hate this, I know. He can hear me at home just fine. If he has the one ear turned toward me, the other ear is, he can't hear me at all. So anyways, my name is Carol Gasho. I've only been in town 15 years, and that's what I'm gonna try to cover, is the last 15 years of the community resources in the CBE history. But it's my understanding, in talking to Kent Bristow and some other people, that this project has been talked about for far longer than those 15 years. It was years prior to that I believe Kent and someone at Renee had talked about it, and Mr. Colson, I don't even know who Mr. Colson was, but I understand that he had thoughts along the same line. But again, it's not my job, I won't talk passionately right now. My job is to deliver the facts about the history of the CBE. So bear with me as I do that, and I do have handouts for later. I just don't like to see people reading them as I'm trying to talk about them at the same time. But I do have them with the major milestones over the last 15 years. In 1998, CER, Community Resources, was incorporated. Many different board members, many of them in this room tonight. I see we're missing one very influential one, my dear friend Sam Bechtel, I don't believe is with us this evening. Tony Armacida, just to name a few names that have participated over the years. One of the first tactical actions of the CR was to commission the Commerce Park feasibility study that was done by Wright State University. I'm not sure what year that was completed, but I remember being involved with that. Now, let's skip to 2002 and talk about acronym CIVIC. This is where they started. In 2002, a CEDA, C-E-D-A, Cooperative, let me get this right, Economic Development Agreement was formed between Miami Township and the Village of Yellow Springs to promote economic development within the designated CEDA area, which is primarily the west side of town, if you will. There's 3 parcels out there. The current CBE, what's known as the Arnovitz property, and the Pitstick property, I believe, were the 3 that were in the CEDA, as I recall them from 2002. I could be wrong on that on one, there may be another one, but I'm pretty sure those 3 were in there. And again, I don't have any of my old files, so I didn't confirm that completely, but I know that that is the general CEDA area. In 2003, the village and community resources enter into an agreement, and then CR prepares a master economic development plan for the village, and started to negotiate to acquire properties in the CEDA designated area, which did not get done until June of 2004. And as everyone knows, the money for that Renee property purchase was $300,000 from the village revolving loan fund, which I understand came from the state community development block grant. So that's where that money came from, and then $100,000 from Community Foundation. We did do preliminary soil borings out there to make sure before we closed on the deal, as I recall, that we could actually build properties out there that would support commerce activities. We didn't want to have any sinkholes out there that we couldn't sell. So that was done, as I recall. And again, these are my recollections, okay? And again, I want to make very clear one thing, and that was in 2004 when we bought that property. I, for one, and I believe several other board members, Antioch Midwest was not on the horizon as leaving the college. So that land was not bought with the intent to give land to Antioch Midwest. In 2005, the 46 acres were annexed to the village of Yellow Springs, and we were awarded 2 federal grants. And this is when I became very active, because I actually just thought, you know, okay, like when I got money for the plant, they write you a check, you hold your receipts, you get your money, life's good. That's not the way these grants work. They just don't write those checks. We had to go through a long and laborious process before they'd even write check 1. That process took 2 years, and I'll talk about that just briefly. So the 2 grants we got, one was for the transportation, and it's administered by ODOT, that's for the roads. The other one is from the Army Corps, which is for the water, resource protection, and infrastructure to do with water and those sorts of things. So in 2006, the village entered into what's called, here we go again, a PCA, Project Cooperation Agreement. And Diane, I have this whole list for you if you'd like that afterwards, okay? So anyways, we did that, but then that just lets us do other things. And then in that year is when we converted or conveyed 11 acres to Antioch University. And again, in that same year, okay, thank you. Okay, Antioch, Sam Bechtel and I made a trip to Columbus and to Springfield to try to get state monies. We were turned down on that, but we did fill out all the applications. In 2007, the park was zoned to a mixed commerce district, and what was very, very important and dear to me was that we actually finally got what's called a FONSI, F-O-N-S-I, which is a finding of no significant impact, which means that we had passed all archaeology, all environmental studies that we needed to pass, and probably then some. In order to do that, we dug up the soybeans or corn one year. I'm not sure what, we did more soil borings. It was just, and trying to work with the Army Corps, oh my gosh. Dan Young just helped me out tremendously in this and held my hand several times or I was going to hurt somebody. So, anyways, that didn't happen. We got through that. And then in 2008, we entered the village, and I keep saying we, and I like to think of it as a we project. I really do. Not just community resources, but the village. It's just not community resources. With the village of Yellow Springs entered into what's called a federal local left project agreement. I don't have an acronym for that one. With ODOT, which allowed us to spend some money. So we were able to get a engineering design study awarded. First you have to pick your contractor, then they have to do stuff, and you got to do stuff. It's just, am I right, Jared? Is that about the way it goes? Okay. And that's about the time I backed out. I said, I can't do this anymore. So anyways, but then the engineering report was provided to the village project manager. And then in 2012, the stage 3 design was completed and approved, but at the same time, ODOT pulled the remaining funds, about $344,000, due to no major activity or no spending, is my understanding. And then we are at today, where Community Resources has approached Village Council about funding some of the balance of the infrastructure left to complete the Center for Business and Education. And I think this is when I turn it over to Mr. Sutton.
Okay, quick correction on what Harry said. I am affiliated with Community Resources. My name is Jerry Sutton. I do hold an elected office there. And he's right, I have attended but not held an office in McKee. Trying to build and amplify on what Carol said. She first is one of my heroes. Anybody that can wage war at the federal government through the bureaucracy and deliver $700,000 to this village deserves all sorts of accolades. And it was largely her who wrote the grants, who bird dogged it, and made it happen. So I very much appreciate it. And she said a key word, partnership. Community Resources and the village have been in this together from the get-go. Village officials, depending on various times, either council members or the village manager or both, attended, sat in the CR meetings. They You know, the village solicitor said, hey, you can't be a full member, you can't vote, otherwise you have to recuse yourself to something before it comes before council. But they were ad hoc members, sat in on all the deliberations. So, where are we? I've got the easy part, the short part. I'm the Polaroid snapshot of where we are today. You had a lot of background, we're going to get some more of the future. Over $1.1 million has been invested today in the community resources. That's not counting whatever the cost of the Antioch University McGregor building is. But all those studies that were taught, the engineering design we have completed, as Carol said, detailed drawings. If anybody would like to page through these, they're not the record copy. The record copy resides with the village because they were done with village, under a village contract. The money did not come to community resources, despite everything that she did. Feds are brighter than that. They want a local authority to do that. That was the village. And the village signed extensive agreements with the two agencies. One of them was 42 pages and the other was close, detailing who had what fiduciary responsibility regarding the administration of that money. So anyway, we have invested 1.1, we are partners, we work together on this. Right now we have the final detailed design that was approved up through ODOT to ODOT standards. It includes the road, the drainage, detention ponds, a 10-foot bike path, built to all the state specs. It took longer than I would have hoped. I know it took longer than Dan. When he recruited me on the board, he'd say, hey, not a problem, next spring, dirt flies. Well, sorry about that, Dan. I know it was in good shape when you left. So, in addition to that, there's an engineering estimate to do what could be termed the first phase. And that engineering estimate says it cost $1.45 million to construct. Now that's just construction costs. And you have to build up, is there a management reserve, how much, is there other administrative costs. I'm not in charge of the project people, I can lend advice. And we started down that path and then had to stop, but the village will determine what that amount is ultimately, the total cost. Moreover, this was December, time goes a year ago, CR conveyed to the village the right-of-way. We had this all designed, so they own the right-of-way, essentially where this road's going to go. 6.1 acres. I kind of view CR's function in this partnership. Our mission is to do economic development, is to promote economic development in the village. And we're kind of go out and catch the bear and bring it in, and then the village kind of says, do we want to do anything with it? We have this, to use another analogy, this opportunity keyed up. We've got detailed design, adequate to do a bid package. We've got 40% of the financing in terms of what remains, the $412,000 Corps of Engineer money that wasn't taken yet. And so we mustered the forces to acquire the land, help with the pay for the design, and we got construction costs. How many? Four. So the village has to consider, we approach the village to consider financing the project, the balance of the project. That's their business, how they go do it. We can, suggest, advise, but it falls to their responsibilities. Why do we want to do it? To provide a sizable, shovel-ready, greenfield space to develop businesses. We do not have one in the village. There is no sizable plot that's greenfield, shovel-ready. I mean, the utilities are laid in, people can start construction. So, the question comes, what do we want to build out there? What do we want to see built? A lot of that is defined in various documents. The most recent is the zoning that the village labored for 5 years, cost thousands of dollars, thousands of person hours to develop, and it refers a specific subsection to ourselves, referencing back to the original zoning, and it says, no building or premises shall be used, and no building shall be erected, which is to be used for any purpose except as following: data processing and computer centers, professional buildings, research, testing, design, development, engineering, and training. That kind of sounds like YSI. Office buildings, institutional offices, that is, telemarketing and telephone-based services, libraries, printing and publishing operations, municipal buildings. Well, that takes exception to putting municipal building, but that's a different discussion. Light manufacturing and assembly line operation, and some limited structures incidental to the principal use. Doesn't say anything about retail, doesn't say anything about housing, doesn't say anything about hotels, doesn't say anything about strip malls. Those specific uses are what are permitted.
1 minute.
So, why do we want this project? To raise the tax base. The last significant move in the industrial commerce tax valuation in this village was in 2008, when Bernay tore down a $1.1 million structure on the Dayton Street property, and that would translate today to $25,000 in tax revenues to the local entities. That was the last move. We right now are paying $1,050 in property tax. We envision if this gets built out, it would generate on the order of just for the local entities, would get 80% of the property tax. It would generate per year $800,000 in revenue. That would hopefully relieve some of your property taxes. So, it must be about out of town. That's a quick stop of where we are. We've teed it up for the village council. We'll see if they drive it down the center, into the rough, or win.
Hi, I'm Lisa Abel, and I've worked at YSI for 24 years, and I started when I was 15. A couple comments I wanted to make. First, just a correction from Jerry's accolades of Carol. The grant writer was actually Ellen Hoover, so I want to give recognition to Ellen for doing that for the federal grants. Another thing I just wanted to point out, being at YSI, one of the remaining manufacturing companies in Yellow Springs, is that we see growth in manufacturing in the U.S. and in Ohio. We don't see it so much in some of the commodity types of industries, but we do see it in high tech, medical devices, energy manufacturing, and I expect that trend to continue. So I just wanted to make that point that not all manufacturing is going away. In fact, some of it's thriving and growing. I'm a former Community Resources Board member. Was on the board for about 9 years. And, so now I'm just an interested party. So I wanted to just give a little bit more to what Jerry said about why now, why the CBE, why Yellow Springs. costs for services and repairs and maintenance, et cetera, for the village will probably continue to increase. If you continue to pay people to do jobs, you're going to keep giving them raises, you're going to see their health benefits go up, and you got to pay for pensions, et cetera. Same with road construction. If you resurface roads, the asphalt costs don't go down every year, they go up. And so we're going to see those costs continue to rise. Well, how does that get paid? It gets paid out of taxes, right? Those payments get spread amongst all of us. And right now we're at about a stable population, but we're not growing. And the demographic trends are that we're probably going to have more fixed income folks in the coming years, and younger generation folks. And those younger generation folks, are they willing and able to pay more taxes? The other significant piece of tax revenue, in 2006 there was a new tax that generates about $750,000 a year, or about 20 to 25% of the operating budget for the village. That's a new tax, and that probably needs to stay in order to keep the services we're enjoying right now. Commercial tax, an increase in commercial tax, would benefit the village, the schools, and the township, and give some relief to individuals, as Jerry has pointed out. Now, I want to talk a little bit about companies that have left, and kind of that timeline, what that looks like. So in 1995, SAS Automation, that started by Trent Fisher, left. When all these companies had gone somewhere locally, Xenia, Cedarville, Fairborn, etc. 1998, 3 years later, Klein Associates, which is now Applied Research Associates, left. Sometime in the early 2000s, a plastic injection company with 50 employees left, Millworks. 2003, Applied Sciences, a company that Max Lake is the founder of, left. 2003 also, most of Renee left. 2007, LaserLink, Dan Dixon's company, left. Between 2008 and 2012, Antioch Publishing, or Creative Memories, gone. And then we have a near miss in 2011. EHDS, the company that Roy Qualls was with, almost left. And if not for a few local benefactors and a few other assists, they stayed. And now we're in 2013. EnviroFlight needs more space. Where are they going to go? Who has 30,000 square feet here? And parking. Servlet needs to leave. They don't have the infrastructure here for the services they provide. So there's a pattern. I can't tell you who's leaving next, but I'm certainly seeing a pattern. Every 3 to 5 years, there's another business leaving. So at this point, and moving forward, some of the open issues that we see, we need financing options and costs and projections. And that has been started with the passage of, from council to permit bond council to help with those projections, and an underwriter to also help with those options. We need the infrastructure at the park, and as Jerry has talked about, we've got the plans to get that infrastructure built. At the same time, and probably in parallel or later, we do need to figure out structures, roles, responsibilities of the village, of community resources. Do we go into a CIC mode, etc.? That does need to be figured out, but we don't see that as impeding what needs to be done on the infrastructure at this point. Possibly more zoning updates. If folks are still concerned, after looking at the zoning code, about what can and cannot be permitted at the CBE, maybe we need to adjust the code a little further. And then we need to figure out further future capacity and project management to support the continuing efforts, and I'll talk a little bit more about that. And then the other open issue is to start the build out, obviously. Once the road's in, once the infrastructure's in, get going on finding some first tenants. People have asked about the schedule. Well, I can't really give you dates, but in terms of short-term milestones, we need financing, bid out the construction, get the construction started, Those are all kind of your short-term milestones. Long-term, we need development planning and execution. So I'm a new business owner, or I've been in business for 20 years, and I'm ready to expand. So as I approach the village, somebody has to have told me that this is available. So there's got to be some marketing done. And then who do I contact? Who do I call? It's not really clear right now who I would call if I wanted to build here. And then I'd probably need to figure out how to work out the business case with the developer. Pretty typically, companies are renting, not buying buildings, but they are signing long-term leases that give the builder confidence to get the loan to build a building. And then, I'm going to ask the village for incentives, because I could go to lots of places with my business. Now, the village can decide what kind of incentives are appropriate, but I'm going to at least ask. And then I have to go through the PUD process. I have to present a plan to the zoning groups and to the village saying, I'm going to need 5 acres, and it's going to look like this, and my parking's going to go here, et cetera, et cetera. And that's got to go through several public processes. And then the builder needs to do the architecture for the building, get some loans, do the construction, do the hookups, and then move in and get going. So how long does that take from the time that I say I'm ready to move to the time I've got a place to move into?
2 minutes.
Okay. Roles and responsibilities. As both Jerry and Carol mentioned, we consider this a partnership with the village, with the township. Community Resources owns the land for CBE. They've secured the grants, and they're presenting the opportunity now to move forward. The village has administered the funds, contracted with engineering firms, and would contract with the construction firm, and owns the road right away. And then there's this question mark. Who's the project manager? Who does marketing? Who's the prospect's contact? Who negotiates the incentives? And who interfaces with the developer as needed? I did a little brainstorming, this kind of segued into something a little different, because people have been asking, who's going to move in there? Well, did any of us see EnviroFlight coming 10 years ago? I sure didn't. I couldn't have even conceptualized that business model, but great. So some ideas, a couple practical ones that EHDS expands, that EnviroFlight moves in to do a production facility, Yellow Springs Brewery does bottling. These are all my ideas. Please don't start those rumors. Okay. Cleveland Clinic partners with Yellow Springs for a natural healing center. The Winds opens a culinary institute. I mean, project-based learning becomes an entire educational facility here. Goes on. In summary, past councils have had the vision and courage to support this CBE. And these kinds of investments do incur risk. But what is Plan B? It's a multi-generational plan with multi-generational benefit. So I'm encouraging the village and the council to invest in the future with an investment that has potential better payback than any other expenditure. And I also encourage you to use your time wisely.
Before we move into phase 3, we're going to open the floor up for discussion, for questions for these 3 panelists in the areas that they spoke about. So do we have anyone that would like to ask a question or make a comment? Our timer says 1 minute each. We're right here with Lee Herring.
I'd like to ask Lisa, you said that the CBE owns the land, and yet it appears that you're asking the village to take all the financial risk. And if you sell the land, what happens to those funds? Why not give the land to the village, let the village develop it, and pay back its $700,000 that you want the village to put in through the sale of the land to industry?
That's a possibility. But at this point, I'm not sure there's been any discussion with the village about purchasing the land. I'm not sure there's been any evaluation of the land at this point. And the idea all along has been to use the sale of parcels to pay back the $300,000 to the village. The investment that the village would make to continue the infrastructure would get paid back through businesses that land there that start paying property and income tax.
Another question? Yes, Karen?
It's okay,
Okay.
You mentioned a large number of businesses that have left. Have any of them been contacted to see if they left? Did they leave because there was not available land? Did they have other reasons? Has this been done?
Yes, and for the most part, well, I mean, many of them left because there was no space to expand. That was certainly not the case for Renee, and that was certainly not the case for Creative Memories. But all the other up-and-coming businesses, with the exception of possibly one, left because there was not enough space to expand here.
Any more?
John?
Well, I just have a question, or a comment rather than a question, and I'm stating this as purely as an engineer, not with anyone who's had any involvement with the project, and that is that there's two factors that really influence timing of construction at this point in the process, now that the plans are complete. And one is that contractors right now are very hungry for business. They're hungry in two ways. One is that the economic climate has generally been down, so they've been lacking work. The other is that at this time of year, they're always hungry for projects because they want to have something to begin the spring with before the rest of the projects come up, and it gets, so it's a very competitive market right now. That may or may not be the case in 3 months or 6 months. So there's a construction timing aspect that is advantageous now that may not be true later, and that's true. That's advice I'm giving all the clients I'm working on, regardless of the kind of construction project. The other thing is that, as everyone knows from the economic news in the country, the cost of borrowing money now is very, very low, regardless of what you're borrowing it for, if you qualify. So there's no better time to borrow money than right now to take on a major project. That may not be true in the future, so that's another consideration. And with the bond money, it's also not available for other purposes than this, for other village services or activities.
Thank you, John. John, you could have actually had 3 minutes if you would have signed up. That was a 3-minute comment. Let's go back to 1-minute comments. In regards to the presentations that were made, in regards to these three.
Do I have it?
Go.
My name is Bob Baldwin.
I think you're a 3-minute.
Before we talk about spending $700,000, I think we really have to take a step backwards and be quite rational about what we're talking about. The big elephant in the house now is the sale of Creative Memories. 95,000 square feet, 12 or 14 acres went for $700,000. You talk about a deal. That's a deal. But when we talk about space, I think we ought to question, what do we have right now? How full is McGregor? I think it's a third full. What's going to happen to Fells? What's going to happen to some of Antioch's empty buildings? We don't know. The other thing I know is I have been renting buildings since I moved the Ford dealership out of the original building on Dayton Street to Xenia Avenue. And I have lost probably 4 businesses over the last 20 years, not because the space wasn't there. The first reason was their programmers came up from Cincinnati and they didn't like the commute, so they moved out. The second reason is businessmen still have a bottom line. And a big part of that bottom line is rent and cost of building. I have had tenants leave because there was an empty Kroger store in Faribault at half the rent. So if you really want business, my personal thing would be, spend your $700,000 and offer incentives for businesses, green businesses, the kind we want. It's called tax abatement. No one in Elton likes to talk about tax abatement. Every other community that wants jobs, tax abatement is a big part of it. So,
Thank you, Bob. Okay,
So one more here.
okay, let me explain it again. These are for questions, we're going to have a whole general session in phase 3 of this, but these questions are specifically for the presentations that were made, the 10-minute presentations that were made. Okay?
Okay, so my name is Christine Roberts, and I have a question to tag on to Harvey's question, which was, how many of these businesses that left, maybe you know, I'm not sure, how many of these businesses that left were prepared to build a building? Because this is quite a, talking about bottom line, that's, I think, do you know the answer?
I don't think any of them were prepared to build. They are renting where they are. And the premise that we're going for with the CBE is that someone who has a decent enough balance sheet will sign a long-term lease with a developer who will build the building and will lease the space to them. So there's never been really, in the past 10 years, an idea that any business is going to have the cash or the interest in building their own building. And I'm seeing that even in my business. Nobody in the Xylem world is building buildings. So.
Okay, let's take 2 more questions for these panelists. Yes?
There's been a great deal of concern in town for protecting green space and rural land. The north and east and south of the village boundaries, those perimeters are quite well protected by development easements. It's the western front that is basically not protected. You have easement on the Elder Welch Farm, which is sort of further down out on Dayton Yellow Springs Road, but nothing really on that front where the CBE is. And you talk then about 2 other properties, the Pit Stick property and the Arnovitz property, which, as I understand, is down near Snip Road. I mean, it's a little further west than the CBE property. So if any of those moved along with you to help develop commercial properties or business properties, what have you thought about to try to put in place that would help align itself with the concerns in town to prevent sprawl?
Let me see if I can deal with that one. First of all, we're addressing the CBE property here tonight, I believe. As regards that, this partnership has gone forth to annex it to the village. That CETA that was mentioned earlier was a sharing of revenues, tax revenues, between the township and the village, because we annexed it from the township. The village then, it came into the village as agricultural land. They rezoned it into a PUD first to build the AUM property, and then the balance, the other 35 acres, went to a mixed commerce provision, and now it's back into PUD. So the village and us have had designs for better than 15 years as to what the use was, how to control that land mass. It does, the border backs up on Jacoby Creek watershed there. We're fully cognizant of that. I don't think we're going to see any development on that. Can't speak for the Pit Stick property. You know, private owners have a lot of rights and responsibilities that he as a citizen can't really control. That's why we have zoning. The township went through a big land use management program. That's what that purpose is, to define sources and uses of these activities. To answer your basic question, what is our strategy beyond our borders in the Yellow Spring border? Right now, we have a hard time doing what we're doing to solve the land use management problems in the township.
So if I understand, you're essentially saying that any other entity would probably face too many hurdles, and that would protect the village. It's too laborious and attenuated the process, and that's the insurance we have. Well, I mean, I'm trying. I don't want to say that, but that's essentially the answer.
Sir, thank you. Thank you very much.
Well, I don't know that it's really been answered.
Well, we'll move forward. I mean, do you have any other comment on that, Jerry? Okay. We'll keep it on above board then. Before moving in, one last question.
This is a response to Michael.
Okay.
The village does have an open space plan. The Jacoby Creek Valley is part of it. And what would inhibit development farther west is that the village would not extend utilities any farther than its boundaries. That's our policy. So the threat of further development beyond the CBE is practically non-existent.
That's our interim village manager, Kent Bristol, who just spoke. Moving on into the second session, the second part of this, we have 8 speakers to present their views. Thank you very much. We have 8 speakers to present their views on the CBE proposed project. We will alternate between those that are for the project and those that are against the development of the project. Each of these speakers has signed up prior to this evening, but we do have still 3 openings on for speakers to present that are opposed to the project. So if you want to raise your hand and jump up for that, you're certainly welcome to. Before we get started with that, I'm going to ask Ms. Monroe Beard to come up and give us a brief informational.
Hello, I'm Christine Robier. You guys probably knew me from, well, I ran for council. I lost. And my husband and I run Peaches and the Import House. And basically, well, and I'm new to the board for CR, so slightly biased here. But what I wanted to point out is bringing companies and developing our CBE park will bring that many more people to our community. Like I said when I was running for office, it would bring a wealth of people, diversity, jobs. The affordability factor would be impacted. There are so many people here. My neighbors, like I said before, my neighbors just had to move to Dayton, and they're renting their house because they can't afford to live there anymore because of our taxes. And I spoke with them and they said, please do use this as an example because absolutely 100% the taxes are too high for us to stay. He's an artist and his wife was a massage therapist. So I mean, these are our people. We're an artist community and we're running our own people out of here because they can't afford to be here anymore. Now, you know, obviously, like I've said before, I am completely open to viable, you know, options going along with the CBE park. But unless somebody else comes up with a real juicy way to offset our taxes, man, this is the best way. It's the biggest bang for our buck, essentially. I mean, you're talking about $800,000, which anyone who owns a business, has run a business, is a manager of a business, knows $800,000 is really not that much money to sink into
something that is going to possibly be that big a payoff. So that's one point. Now, bringing people back into the community, you know, we've lost so many people who, the influx of people for the 50s and 60s came because there was work. They came, they bought houses, they settled, they raised families. We don't really have that right now. That goes into the affordability and the diversity factor. Am I close? Okay. And I also wanted to point out specifically the viability of our downtown also is critical to having more people and not just relying on the tourist dollar. I mean, if we have that many people working at the CBE, they will come and eat at Peaches and shop at Tom's and get their, you know, stuff from Town Drug, and they'll have dinner at the Winds, and because it's right there. So there's just so many more opportunities than just the basic, you know, can we bring businesses to Yellow Springs, you know? Okay, sorry, bye.
Thank you. Next, I'd like to call up Miss Christine Roberts. If you can come on up. Ms. Roberts is opposed to the CBE.
Yes, hello everybody. Of course, I would like to see our town prosper, and I understand we are up against many challenges. The points I'm going to make are the things that give me pause about the project. So I want to ask, what is the role of government in the pursuit of economic development? In a pure capitalist society, a capitalist democracy, business creates commerce while government regulates that activity so that the greed of a few people do not disadvantage everyone else. There are many theories how these entities can shift positions, and again we're talking about government as versus your corporate sector. So how these go back and forth, I would say there's many theories on how this can work, but in our current American society has pushed the limits of corporate takeover of our tax dollars to an unprecedented extreme. It used to be that if a company had a good idea, then venture funding in the business sector could be found to support the risk. Today, an unbelievable degree of taxpayer drainage is happening as businesses find ways to limit their own risk and place the burden of risk and potential failure on the unrepresented taxpayer. Often, the entity which allows this drainage to occur is some form of quasi-public-private organization. They have a foot in both places. And again, we're talking about government versus your business sector. So an example, really big example of a quasi-public-private organization are the two giant mortgage lenders, Fannie Mae and Freddie Mac. These are private companies that are funded with tax dollars, and so they are able to operate without oversight while draining federal funds.
1 minute.
Okay. Okay, I just have to read it fast then. These institutions became the final resting place for unpayable mortgage loans. I'm going to skip now to another quasi-government entity, government case such as Jobs Ohio, which has been in litigation almost continuously since its creation. Locally in Yellow Springs, we have the quasi-government institution, Community Resources. Now, I do believe that this group is formed with good intentions and that the hardworking volunteers have meant well. They have, however, operated as a secret group since their beginning. Their meetings have been by invitation only. So far, they have borrowed $300,000 from the taxpayer. And I have a point to make about how they tried to get that forgiven, and because they donated property to the village for an entryway. It's using the village to pay for the entryway. They figured the $300,000 should be forgiven. I can't go into detail to explain it. You'll just have to try to get that. You can call me later. It's hard to believe, but that letter is a public record. It's in the council packet from last year. Now the CR wants an additional $700,000 from taxpayers, and I've been informed they're asking for $8 million. And if they finance it, it'll be even more. Maybe it's getting into the millions. They say that this will increase our tax base. I wonder if they, okay, I have to skip this. They say we might lose the matching grants, but how many grants have been lost for water distribution, sewage, roads, upgrades? There's a lot of grants that have been lost while our attention has been, yeah. Yeah, I'm so sorry, I didn't know what my comment was. Okay. May I make one more point? I just want to make the point that a commercial entity did approach the community resources with the money to do the development. It was a solar field, and community resources refused to talk to them. That project came with $500,000, $500,000. Okay, thank you.
Thank you, thank you. Oh, and the beat goes on. Next, we're going to have a presentation. Chris, are you still here? Chris Mucher, are you still here? Okay. We're going to have a presentation by Chris, a 3-minute presentation by Chris, and on deck, may I have, is this Don? Mr. Don Johnson. On deck. Yeah. Getting ready to lose.
Hi, my name is Chris Mucher. I just wanted to add a township perspective to the evening. I'm sure everybody knows that townships provide basic services. We mow the grass, we plow the snow. That's going to be important. We put out fires. What else we do? We bury the dead. It's pretty exciting stuff. But it's essential services. I think everybody will agree these are essential services. What people may not know is that we do it on a shoestring. Our budgets are minuscule. Everything included, we're less than 1/10 of the budget of Village of Yellow Springs. Not counting the fire department, we have 1 employee to do all those things. He's probably going to be plowing snow at 3 o'clock this morning, and he's probably going to be conducting the burial at 3 o'clock in the afternoon at Glen Forest Cemetery. Over the years, the township has been able to manage its funds, if not really well, then at least we squeak by. Roughly 3 years ago, with Governor Kasich coming in and an $8 billion deficit that he was facing, he decided the best way to balance the Ohio State budget was to take a large portion of local government funds away from all the municipalities, townships, libraries, everybody you can think of. These were sales tax revenues that are generated locally, that go back to the state, that are supposed to have come back to the local jurisdiction. Started at 30% return, it's worked its way down to 3% before he got here, and it's now down to 1.5%. 1 minute. Other than that, we pretty much are only dependent upon property tax, and that's, I guess, where we are for this evening. This project will build out in the next 10 years. It would just about equal the loss that we were faced with Governor Kasich. About $25,000 a year. It doesn't sound like a lot, but it's about 40% of our general fund. So we went into this project looking for economic development as partners with the Village of Yellow Springs, and I think we're even more committed to it today. Thanks.
Don Johnson?
I hate to disappoint you, but I'm not a mister.
Oh, hi, Don.
Hi. Good evening.
I was spending my new bodies.
I like that too. Folks, I spend 11 hours of my day away from this village.
Don, use the mic, please. I don't know.
I spend 11 hours of my day away from this village. I drive down to the wonderful land of Warren County where we know about development. Gosh, did we know about development. And I get the opportunity to see just about every doggone subdivision that comes through and get to help out with every opportunity that our economic development department has to bring more in. So with that, let me contrast why I live in Yellow Springs. First off, 2 planning commissions and 2 village councils have ratified language in our comprehensive plan that specifies that when property is annexed, developers assume the cost of the infrastructure installation, and then it's dedicated to the village. If it is, the village maintains it, and if not, if it stays in private hands, then the village doesn't. And I've just recently learned, because I'm away 11 hours a day, that the right-of-way has already been dedicated without any infrastructure in it. That's quite unusual. Secondly, I think it's not financially prudent to assume more debt. Our village recently received its last estate tax payments, ending those tax revenues from that source. We still have 3 more years on our current bond that we ought to be calling, we ought to be paying it off, and taking whatever savings we have there and call it earnings. When we're debt-free, as Warren County is, we're more attractive to business. We look stable. Of course, it doesn't hurt to have 2 major highways flowing through there, but most certainly they are a very stable environment for economic development. And then villagers, as villagers, I think we have a right to know what the rate of return on our investment would be should this go forward. And let me just say, I'm not pro or con per se. I just am a little uncomfortable ponying up more tax money, because eventually whatever gets bonded out is going to come back to us for some number of years, 10 years, 20 years, however long that bond lasts. And then just the timing that would have it, I received in my email today, Site and Facility Planning's top 10 things that developers look for when they're going to develop. Number 1, keeping the cost of the labor in check. Number 2, the road to profitability. That's roads, big highways. People want to be seen off the highway. Workers who have the right stuff. Well, we all have cars, and 75% of us that are in the workforce drive out of this village every day anyways. So I don't think that that's so much an issue if we're talking regional development. Connected locations. That means telecom, folks. High speed, and choices. Not just Time Warner, not just AT&T. We need more telecom choices. And if you want 5 through 10, you can get that at Site and Facility Planning Insider.
Thank you. You really make my job easy. Thank you. Next we'll have, and Don, it was something here because I had you both on pro list and con list. So when you said, I'm not pro or con, these are just the facts, so I'm glad I got that right. Next we'll have Mr. Dan Young, who is pro the CBE. Do you guys need us to move this panel back in the middle? Would that be better? Or down here?
Thank you for the opportunity to talk tonight for 3 minutes. Tonight I'm representing myself as an earlier volunteer job on the CR board, and also the chair for a few years of those. Also as a part, as I'm sure you all know, Young's Jersey Dairy. Been part of Yellow Springs at 45387. Yes, I know I don't live here. 2 days away from being 60 years living just down the road. Community. And of course, I have to be branding myself for Antioch University. I'm on the Antioch University Midwest board. We just got done with a meeting tonight. I'm currently chair of that board. I want to review a couple things that was talked about at the beginning. There were many local meetings during our inception, our planning, our dreaming, our working to meet a village council request that we think about a long-term plan, where, a place that meets the needs of the community to retain, attract, grow jobs and opportunities, businesses and organizations. We presented many times to many different groups, Environmental Commission, Planning Commission, Zoning, Village Council, I don't know how many times. And we also had a number of our own public meetings, at least one of which I remember was larger than this one. This is a good group. We had a little bit more, at least on one of them, if not 2. So we did have a lot of public input at that time during our inception. And the community resources, it consisted of folks from larger businesses, which in Yellow Springs means YSI, small businesses, yeah, correct, sorry, Carol, yes. Education, government at large, we had a large 15-member board at the time. We listened, we talked, we listened some more. We formed a plan, talked to many economic development folks, and of course had one on our committee. We talked to developers, state officials, gathering advice and counsel. We sought and were awarded around $1.4 million worth of money from the state, federal, local governments, as well as local foundations. And at the very beginning, our treasurer, Cindy Bechtel, was like joining up with 4-H. We had to come up with our dues as individual members, if I remember right. But Chancellor Noodleman from Antioch University couldn't be tonight. She's at another one of our campuses. She wanted to make sure that I conveyed that Antioch University supports the plan, the infrastructure, the building of it, because it will, over time, provide opportunities to collaborate with organizations that may need our services next door. Training, degree completion, certification, who knows what. I cannot tell you what it would be, but I do know that if we build the infrastructure, it will happen. We must be patient. Thank you very much.
Now, I'm going to put out there again, we have 3 spaces that are open for people that want to speak that are against the CBE. And if you want to do that, raise your hand. Right now, I'm going to call Rory Qualls up to the podium.
I'm wondering.
Oh, you can hang on. Hang on. In section 3, we're going to go back to your questions.
I was just thinking because there aren't that many people, but I could take a double spot because we don't have equal numbers.
Well, that would be wonderful, and I
second
was.
that third, yeah.
What we're going to do, though, in section 3, it's open to everyone, and that's when you can actually speak again. Come on up, Rory.
Well, good evening. My name is Roy Qualls. I'm one of the founding partners of eHealth Data Solutions, and I'm currently serving as one of the volunteers on Community Resources, which really, you've heard the alphabet soup, you've heard the meetings and the grant applications, so it really is as exciting as shredded wheat without milk. But the reason that I think a lot of us stick to it and have stuck with it over the years is I think that we have witnessed the drain of places to work from Yellow Springs. When I faced that myself with EHDS, we started the Operations Center in my study. Thankfully, we outgrew that, and then I got to rent from Bob, and that was a great experience. And then I rented from Millworks, and that was a great experience. And we kept growing, and where did we go? And I know that a lot of people question the role of government, but I can tell you that as soon as Springfield heard that there was a young, high-tech company looking for a place to sit, they were all over us and saying, you just tell us how much and what you need, and we will make that happen. And in fairness to my business partners and everybody else, I can't expect my partners to pay a premium to stay in Yellow Springs. So I insisted on comparable rent rates for Class A office space. There is no other Class A office space in town. We have it, okay? And Antioch University took the other half of that. So I think it's really about keeping the town affordable. It's less affordable if you have to drive out of town to work and you have to buy a second car. It's less affordable if we don't have enough kids to populate our schools. It's less affordable if you have to spend a lot of time and energy away from the home and so forth. So it really is about making the village more livable. And I think I have a lot of other stuff I could say, but I'll yield my 10 seconds to the next speaker.
And our final, I'm Catherine Vander, thank you, was going to be late. Wonderful, come on down. You're the next contestant.
Hi, I'm Catherine Vanderheiden, and I am also a volunteer at Community Resources and have been for, I think, the last 5 years. I don't have a lot more to add to what has been added except for this. We're all afraid. We are often afraid of change in this community, and I wish we had more hope and more energy and more willingness to stop making up stories that don't exist and really talking to one another about what's possible. I think the CBE is very possible. I do. It's going to take some investment. It's also going to take some risk. But as someone said to me earlier this evening, when you go fishing, you hope to get some fish. Eventually, you might even get some fish. But you still have to invest in a fishing pole and a fishing line. And you still have to have the will to go out and go fishing. And eventually, you're going to have something to put on your table. But if you're not willing to really pay attention to that, you will have nothing. And what I believe is that if we don't build this, we will have nothing for anyone to come to. We really do not have enough space in this community for businesses who might want to come from the outside, who will have much to offer us, because we're not the most unique place on the planet. We're pretty unique. But there are lots of wonderful places with wonderful businesses who might want to come to our community precisely because of the kind of community that we are, and businesses that want to grow from within. So if we don't build it, we won't have it. And that's really why I think we really do need to build it. And it's going to take some investment, some energy, some hope, some dedication, and some willingness to talk to one another constructively. So I appreciate this forum. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Okay, we're going to move into phase three this evening, and that is to hear from any of you. If you would like to make a comment on something that has been said, or if you have a personal question that has come up, now is your time to shine. We have 1 minute. You have 1 minute to state what it is that you would like to say. Along with the resource panel, the interim village manager, Kent Bristol, and former village manager, Laura Curlis, both who have background on this proposed project and knowledge on this proposed project, are here in the audience as well. So what I need you to do, just raise your hand.
There's one more speaker who said that he signed up.
Oh.
You could speak.
Maybe I... Glenn Courtright.
Yes.
Come on down. I do apologize, Glenn. I was so near the end here. I do apologize. Hold on to all that other stuff that I just said. So I don't have to say it again.
Wow, there's a lot of people here. Yeah, hi, my name is Glenn Courtright, and I put a script in front of me tonight because usually I have a tendency to really wax long, so this is going to keep me on track. First thing I want to do is state myself. I founded EnviroFlight 5 years ago, and a couple things I wanted to express to you why I came to Yellow Springs, and I also want to thank you for making my business and my employees really feel welcome here. And so we're very sincere about that. Back in 2009, I began a search to establish a research and development facility for Enviroflight. And what we're doing is we're doing some very unique things on animal feed production and waste conversion. So a couple of things I was looking for. Number one, the community had to have a proven track record of embracing sustainability. I needed access to an educated workforce. I was looking for low crime, since we operate 7 days a week and sometimes late at night. I wanted a high quality of life and easy access to restaurants and shopping during business hours for my employees, and a desirable location for my clients to come visit. I looked all over the Miami Valley, and the only place I could find was right here in Yellow Springs. Now, I was fortunate enough to find real estate at Millworks. It was the only place that had the right square footage and met all the criteria. So we looked at all kinds of places all around the area. Since 2009, I've had very good responsiveness and support from local village council or utilities, even in spite of getting some windstorms and some problems, but they've fixed the problems and we've been running full out ever since. The police department, the Chamber of Commerce, our Miami Township officials, and Greene County Economic Development. So I want to thank all of you for all your support over the past few years. And also I've learned and become friends with a lot of people here in town. I get a lot of how you call altruistic business advice and how to run my business. So I want to say thank you for that. But basically a lot of encouragement, a lot of support. And the other thing too is I can seriously state I have no reservation stating that Yellow Springs is business friendly, in spite of what some of the outside communities do think. Now here we are today. It's 2013. 5 years ago we started with nothing but an idea, and I need to find 30,000 square feet of space in the next 6 months. We have customer demands, we're growing, we have no idea how we're going to support these orders. So I've got a couple of different options here in town. One, I can stay at Millworks and try to find existing space, but what that does, that displaces other businesses. We don't want to force other businesses out. I can take advantage of the creative memory space. We're looking very hard at that right now. There's some limitations with that. And 3, look at the college. There's some buildings on campus. We're really trying to be creative, looking at some different options for engineering, research, and development.
20 seconds.
And unfortunately, another option is leave town. I don't want to, but that is an option. And working with Greene County Economic Development and the Dayton Development Coalition, looking for space. So essentially, if the CDE were here today, I would go. I work with developers, and as a business, we don't build buildings, we rent. And developers work with us to establish complexes in order to put our businesses in place. So if you have any questions, I can say something after the fact, but once again, I want to thank you for all the support, and hopefully we get this project moving forward, because there's more guys like me coming behind the wings.
Thank you, Glenn. All right, let's open the floor up. If you have a comment that you want to give or a statement that you want to make, this is your time to shine. Anyone? Yes, right up here front. And then we have a person in the back.
My name's Ellen Hoover, and I have a question, not a comment. Somebody said that, I think it was Christine made a comment about a solar firm that made inquiries and was turned away by CR, and I would like Jerry Sutton and Catherine to answer that, whether it's true or accurate.
We entertained at an open meeting 2 different alternative energy companies. One was a solar farm that wanted to take 10 acres of our property and put a village solar farm on it. We are attempting to raise the tax base. If we make that a village property that is a static display, doesn't employ anybody but possibly window washers to clean the solar displays, we didn't really see that as a match because it wasn't furthering our objectives. The other alternative energy person had this concept where he had a large ball, a bunch of small balls spread around the area with collector meter shining up in this large ball that would superheat water, turn it into hydrogen, he'd capture the hydrogen, and he'd pump it underground. We invested a couple hours listening to him and thanked him for his interest in our project.
Thank you. In the back, we have a question. Wait, right, the white hat, yes.
Yeah, I have a question, and maybe I should have asked it when the panel was there.
Please stand.
Okay, I have a question, and I probably should have asked it when the panel was there, but if funding is secured and the infrastructure is in place, then what's the next step?
Any of the panel members want to answer that?
So after the road's there, the infrastructure's there, there are a series of steps that need to happen, and they require resources. So you've got to have some marketing, you've got to have a project manager, somebody, you've got to have a point person. Who do the businesses talk to? And then you probably have identified a few development partners that the businesses can talk to about space. You've got to have someone from the village to talk about any incentives that might be available. So there's a whole series of steps that will happen. And I kind of walked through that a little earlier. If I'm a business owner that wants to upgrade, move into CBE, those are the things I need to get done next before I can move in. Unless somebody builds a building for Glenn's business, and builds twice as much space, and there happens to be space that I can just negotiate a lease and move into. So that's kind of the next steps.
Could we get a mic to Ms. Roberts, please? Oh, she has it.
Hi there. Again, I do like to see this community thrive. Is this on?
It is on.
So, as regards the solar field, it's kind of gone past the point where we can recall that idea. But I did speak with Jerry Sutton and Catherine Vanderheiden on the phone when that company did come to town. And, I was told at that time that it did not provide jobs, okay? I think what it could not get them to see is that what you need to compare that idea to is the idea of just taking from the village coffers. How much money is this was a way to develop, this was funding to develop the project. It would have used 1/3 of the field, of the space. It would have temporarily downsized the project. It came with $500,000 up front. It would have provided low-cost solar energy to the village for 20 years. And then, guess what? You could develop 2/3 of the project, your roads would be paid for by industry, and then in 20 years, you could have that's the lifespan of the solar collectors. After that, they go back to the recycling, and you could continue to the last visits. It takes 20 years to build one of these business parks anyway. Okay, but
thank you. Ms. Johnson.
I just have a couple of questions. Would you have had the balance sheet to satisfy a builder like Turner or Miller Valentine to put a building on the CBE site? And let's just think that over. And then are we interested in looking at doing a special assessment to recoup the cost of the money you're asking the villagers to lay out for this? It happens in almost everywhere. Beaver Creek, Bellbrook, all throughout Warren County. I mean, special assessment is the way that infrastructure's dropped out. Government does front the money up front, but the property owner becomes the payer of that infrastructure. So.
All right, first of all, answer your question about balance sheet. I'm a private company and I don't share my balance sheet with anybody.
I didn't want the exact number, but I mean, could you have worked with Miller Valentine to put a building on that field if the infrastructure were improved?
Yes.
That's it. Any other questions? We're on good time right now. Did you want to comment on that, Jerry? All right,
She had a couple of questions. One was the assessment to pay for it. like I say, I'm not in the tax, I'm not in the finance business of the village. The village can do it. The one way that's done all the time is called tax increment financing, TIF. This is our current tax rate. We pay $1,050 per year. After it's developed, it's going to be up here somewhere. It'll probably be a curve, a little step curve over time. The value of revenue generated from this is used to retire the bonds, pay off the bonds. That is the increment increase in valuation. The taxes generated by that go to relieve, to pay off the bonds. That is comparable to your assessment.
Thank you. He came with his own magic marker. Oh, I saw someone with the mic. Okay.
Hi, I'm Craig Measher. I guess I am for this project only because, we need, as a small community, we need to keep reinvesting in ourselves. And for a while, we've always sort of taken out, but we've got to start putting back in. And I think if we start putting back in, that all of the issues and things that people would like will come. It may take 20 or 30 years, but they will come. So it's sort of a circle of life thing. Jerry sort of touched on my question was, a general description of how a bond would work and a bond issue. Maybe somebody from the village could sort of explain from the village side, from the public, how that would work if the length of this project for financing. I know everybody hears the big number. It's not up front. It's a loan, reimbursement type of thing, but there is going to be some expense by the community up front. And can somebody just clarify the timeline? Because I think everybody's kind of freaked out by the big number. Thanks.
Yeah, hi, I'm Laura Curlis, former village manager. And everything's relative, and $700,000 for most of us is nothing to sneeze at, but in the world of projects and government projects for a village with your revenue, it's kind of smallish on the small side. When I was thinking about the project and the amount, and the village has committed, councils before the current council and even the one before it, committed to the Army Corps of Engineers and to ODOT at the time, they entered into agreements. It wasn't CR that entered into the agreement, it was the village that entered into the agreement that if you give us this money, we will build the road. It's a contract. And so as a village manager, I'm like, well, okay, they decided to do it, they entered into a contract, we don't break contracts, we want to do it, and so I kind of started working on it. But of course, politics changes, et cetera, that if the village, the council votes not to do it, then we need to inform the Army Corps not to do it. So to answer your question, the financing is sort of a small piece of it, really. It's the big questions, do you want to do it or not? If not, then you have to break a contract. ODOT already pulled its money because it took too long, because we didn't do what we needed to do as a village and keep it moving. So take $700,000, 10 years. You can bond it over the life of the project. With the roadway, you can do it for 20 years. But I was looking at it as a 10-year bond because the interest rates, you can look out 10 years, you can probably get that low interest rate out 10 years. It'll go up if you go out farther, it'll off. So, 700,000 divided by 10 is 70,000, and then you look at an interest rate of maybe 2%, and you can do the math. And then you have some transactional fees with bond counsel and so forth. So that's pretty much, it's like financing anything. So the Bryan Center bond rolls off in 2016, and that payment is $67,000 right around there. So it's about the same. So you kind of be replacing that debt payment with this debt payment in terms of an infrastructure project. So I kind of viewed it as it's almost a wash in terms of your cash flow for the village. So thank you. I'm happy to talk to you more.
Thank you, Laura. Okay, where's your mic? All right.
I have, I'm wondering if it would make sense for us to find the businesses first before, you know, and are we in that active process of finding businesses that want to locate at the CBE?
Okay, reach out to Mr. Corcoran.
Okay. The thing is, if you're starting a business and you're looking for a community, you need to have your act together before you go. So trying to, I say, start chumming the waters to find somebody. Usually the businesses already have their mind made up where they want to go. Now, when we came here, as I said before, is we looked at a variety of communities and it fit what we were looking for. So we came to you. Now, actively going out, trying to recruit a business is not the best way to go about doing it. That's more opportunistic way of doing things. So do what you continue to do. Position the village, what you stand for, get the infrastructure in place, and I hate to use the overused term, build it and they will come, but they will come. They will come. This is a good place to do business.
Yes.
I'm Andrew Klein, and I just wanted to briefly give my 2 cents. I feel like I'm speaking as a younger person in the room at the moment. I hope you don't take that the wrong way. But from the perspective of a young person looking to grow business here, I own a Green Generation building company in town. You've maybe heard of us, we've done some projects in the area. And also with a young family recently, I'm happy about. And I'm from Yellow Springs, thank you. I'm from Yellow Springs. Originally I grew up here. My grandfather was Jack Klein, the architect, who did Yellow Springs High School and a few other things. Anyway, just to wrap up and get to my point, I really appreciate all of the perspectives that have been presented here this evening. I'm embarrassed to say I'm slightly uninformed as to the history of this endeavor. I would like to say I'm extremely impressed and deeply grateful to the volunteers and the Board of Community Resources that have moved forward with this project. I hope the town embraces the idea. I think it melds perfectly for attracting new talent, young people that would want to come to this amazing village, set up shop, enjoy the benefits that we've worked so hard to create. It's a perfect complement to all of the work that's gone forward and been created in town up to this point. So, last point is that I'd like to just kind of point out the obvious, reiterate. I remember when Community Resources was started. It seems like a long time ago to me now. And I sort of feel that so much time and energy has clearly gone into this process over, what, a decade plus, something like that. And I think the time is now, we're past the recession, the time is now to siege it and move forward and begin. Thank you.
Your grandfather designed the high school?
Yeah.
Wow.
That's great. My grandfather designed the science building at Antioch and the Pearl Gymnasium. Just a couple of clarifications on a couple of facts. In terms of lost grants, there's been times when we have not gotten a grant. In other words, we lost it because we weren't competitive and we didn't get the money. So some of the water grants were in that category. There's very few times when the village has received the money, has received the grant, and then subsequently lost it, which is the ODOT situation and potentially the Corps of Engineers project. So it's a very different situation if you were not competitive and didn't win the grant than it is to have won the grant and then lose it. That's one thing. The other is that in terms of urban sprawl, I'm very concerned with Yellow Springs maintaining a compact environment and not connect, sprawl out to Fairmore and other places. The biggest, as Ken Bristol said earlier, the biggest control on that is not extending utilities outside the village. However, property owners can request to annex. The Kick-Stick Farm can request annexation, and then the village would need to extend services to those facilities. A major control on that is what's known as the urban service area. Yellow Springs has an urban service area, which is the boundary in which gravity sewers can be extended, and a policy not to put in lift stations to extend gravity sewer outside that urban service boundary, which is a very key factor that the village can maintain, and that's an Ohio EPA enforceable mechanism. So there's other controls on urban sprawl than have been talked about so far.
Thank you. Actually, that was answering your question. Yes, okay. Yes?
Hi, my name is Isaac Gellimeter. I'm an employee at Antioch College. And as a chef, I have a deep interest in sustainable food systems. My question, for anyone who cares to answer, is are we not concerned with one of Ohio's leading industries, which is agriculture, preserving agricultural land and building sustainable food systems within our community?
We have somebody that wants to speak to that? And Jerry.
I'll speak to almost anything. I grew up on a small farm. I appreciate farming and how it does. I know it is. Farming is the largest industry in Greene County, apart from the big three, Eds, Meds, and Feds. And sustaining agriculture is great. This village has invested considerable money in buying easements, development easements all around the village. This land that we're talking about, yes, it's growing soybeans today, corn last year, etc. But it's been annexed, it's been zoned, the administration has reviewed it, saucered it, blown it. It's, you know, it is zoned as PUD commercial property. What do we do if we don't do this? Somebody said, wait, you know, line up the opportunities. The industry comes in waves. We are in a kind of a low point, or crawling out of a low point economically. It's taken us 15 years to get to this point, to get it teed up, to take this opportunity. If we wait and don't build, we will miss the next wave entirely. Because by the time we generate, get the energy, get the money, make it happen, it'll pass. And we will continue down the path.
We're going to, just one moment. We're going to finish this up with the next 5 minutes, so we'll be on time. So kind of think about your questions, and we'll move through this quickly. The gentleman in the back.
Thank you. Like you said, industry comes in waves. Agriculture doesn't; it stays consistent, and everyone eats, and we need farmers producing food for us. By paving over valuable agricultural land, you're eliminating that possibility forever. So I would urge us to think about that and to think deeply on whether or not we want to do something that's completely irreversible.
You heard from 2 township trustees. They left out one perspective, which I have. They spent a lot of time with their planning to concentrate any development in the township next to communities. And that the result of that is Center for Business and Education. Without that, we would have little businesses popping up in those farm fields around the township.
Okay.
Hi, I'm Sarah Wildman. I was Economic Sustainability Coordinator for the village for 3 years, and before I started that, I was working for EnviroFlight, and since I did that, I'm working for EnviroFlight, and of course we are really happy that we are here in Yellow Springs, and I like to take some credit for that. But I think it's a great idea that we would encourage people to locate businesses here, and then when we get those people lined up, then we start to build roads and buildings. But nobody is going to commit 3 or 4 years out and to coming once everything is built. So we really need to get it here so that people can come here. And really what we need to be doing right now is both things at the same time. We need to be building the infrastructure, the CBE, and getting ready for new businesses there. And each and every one of us needs to be out there doing marketing and economic development for Yellow Springs and saying, this is a great place to be, a great place to locate. We start bringing people in, get interest, get the stuff built at the same time, and 2 or 3 years, 4 years from now, we start to look like we're getting into talk over. Thanks.
Thank you. The gentleman. Yes, the gentleman in the white shirt. Oh, I thought you had a mic. I'm sorry. Is that you? You have a mic?
He was saying.
Oh, okay.
I'll be real short. I want to answer Patty's question, why not find a firm first? 4 of us are here from Millworks. We're the people who market. There isn't a firm I can think of that said, I want something 2 years from now when you get it all built, when you have it renovated and you have the new heating system and the new walls and the new windows and a better roof. It's the same thing with CBE. They're not going to wait until the road gets built, and frankly, if they had said that 10 years ago, the business would be dried up and gone. So I just want to follow what Sarah said. When a business is looking, they need their space now, and they don't need it 6 months from now. They don't care about you if you don't have it now. They're not coming back.
Thank you. Right behind you.
I wanted to address a question that came up earlier, and I believe that of the businesses that left, a number of them did build their own building. Now, whether they did that with a developer, that's kind of their private matter. But I know Klein built their own building, SAS Automation built their own building, Dan Dixon of Laser Link built their own building. Whether he lived or not, he occupied the entire building. And so, you know, that's kind of a personal decision on the business owner, whether they like to rent or own their own digs or whatever. And EHDS, yes, we have the balance. We have the cash, the balance sheet to move into a building. You know, we're at Antioch, the old Antioch Publishing building now. That's a short-term lease. We're going to have to go somewhere at some point. So we need to be thinking ahead, or you could lose that one too. 10 seconds. And I think that's it. I yield my other 10 seconds.
You should know that I lived across the street from Dan Dixon from the time he was a little boy. Right? And I have watched him, and I have been talking to him. He would have given his left arm to be able to stay in the village. It's that clear.
Well, in the back, yes.
Hi. My name is Thor Sage. I work for the Miami Valley Educational Computer Association. We're located in the Morgan Building, right across the road from the proposed CBE. What we do is, and what I do every single day, is I look for ways to find, to save public schools money. And I do this by providing shared services, shared technology services to public schools across a 6-county region. The reason I wanted to make a comment is because I wanted to address the question of telecommunications services in the village. That's been brought up a couple of times. It was suggested that CERBA was leaving because of a lack of infrastructure. I just wanted to toss out there that the city of Springfield, which has also been brought up a couple of times, is very aggressive in developing fiber optic infrastructure around their area in order to facilitate the delivery of more telecommunications services. couple of weeks ago, the MVECA, the Miami Valley, where I work, actually was voted to partner with the City of Springfield and many other local businesses in an effort to build a large fiber optic ring in the Springfield area that would also have legs that would extend down to our facility in Yellow Springs. There are also many, many other fiber builds going on in the region and many, many, many opportunities to really enhance our capabilities with respect to telecommunication services in Yellow Springs. And I'm looking for opportunities to partner with anybody who would help us save some money for schools.
Thank you. We have time for one more. Does anyone? Let's start right here. Your hand went up first. Here's your mic right here.
My name is Ron Seymour. In the past, I had a recurring dream. In this dream, I'd be walking along the bottom of something, a lake. Maybe in dreams you don't have to worry about breathing. I finally got down to the bottomest level I could find in an autumn ahead of me. It was foggy and muddy water, but I could see there was nothing but a plain. I said, thank God, I'm finally where I can't go any lower. And then I stepped into a hole. And I saw that there were other holes, and gradually I got good at this. And I would find a little opening, and I managed to crawl up into the opening and got up to the next level. Along come another opening, and I crawl up again. This means I am Legion. I am the kind of a new American dream, the people that can get us out of problems. I suggest that with all of the energy going into the CDE, a little percentage of development time for the people who will eventually be managing this whole thing. The village management, township management, CDE management, there will be some. I just would like to know that we're planning that part of the future, because that's the part that will help us get out of any holes that we are now afraid of.
Thank you. Thank you very much. I want to thank all of you. You guys were simply awesome. The Jim's group has put forth that if you want other forums like this, because we got a lot of things going this evening, and we got it in a very respectful manner. So I do thank you. We're out of time. I would like to thank the Presbyterian Church, of course, for letting us all gather here this evening, and Jim's group for hosting it, and our wonderful timekeeper, Dave Turner. And I'm not sure, the gentleman that's holding the mic, your name again, please? John Fleming. That is John Fleming. Gosh.
There's two of them in the room.
Yeah.
There's John Fleming.
We have an announcement.
All right. Officer just came in. If anybody here owns a 2014 silver Mercedes, it's about to be towed from the speedway.
In closing, ladies and gentlemen, wait one moment. In closing, I do have a quote that I want to share with you before we bring our president, Harry Lipset, back up. And the quote is from Scott Pitt, and it says, "When I'm with a group of human beings committed to hanging in there through both the agony and the joy of community, I have a dim sense that I am participating in a phenomenon for which there is only one word: glory." So I thank you for being glorious in this proceeding.
Thank you also, and I want to make an offer. As time goes on, if there is still controversy and still things to be said about this project, let me know. We'll be happy to put on another forum. Thank you, and God bless.